Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me today. Really excited to host a fireside chat with all of you with the better than famous VP and Distinguished Engineer for Security, Mr. Eric Brandwine. Cool. Hey, thanks for being here today, Eric.
Hey, Hart. Happy to be
Appreciate
here.
it. Super cool. So really excited to dig into this topic with you. You've been in AWS now going on 15 years.
Yep.
And really we're part of the security organization from the true day one, right at the very beginning back in the days. I've embarked on that journey about 3 years ago in terms of building a security operations function that supports the field in partnership with your team. And so really appreciated your mentorship and your leadership over the last several years as we've been getting that going.
Thanks.
Maybe you could start by telling the audience here, what was it like 15 years ago to be in security operations?
Well, it hasn't been 15 years. When I joined the company, I was on the team that built VPC, Virtual Private Cloud. So I was actually an engineer. Like I woke up in the morning, I thought about this one service, I figured out what our customers needed, I helped the team build it. And I think it was it's like 11 and a half, 12 years ago, Andy Jassy decided that AWS needed to have its own security team. Prior to that, there was just one large Amazon security team that covered the entire company. And AWS is fundamentally different from Amazon's other businesses. The relationship that we have with our customers and their data and their workloads is much more intimate than any other line of Amazon's business, especially at that time. And so Steve Schmidt was impressed into service as our Chief Information Security Officer. And he walked down the hall and he slapped me on the shoulder and said, "You're a security engineer now. I'm having them update the phone tool." So like I didn't volunteer for the security team. I didn't willingly join it. I mean, I do have some responsibility here because it's been going on a dozen years and I haven't managed to leave the security team. So I can't hold him wholly responsible. But that's how the AWS security team formed. And there were 4 of us, 3 managers and myself. So in the beginning, I was 100% of the engineering bandwidth of the AWS security team. So I was the security operations team, and I was the application security team, and I was, which is clearly a completely unsustainable situation to be in. And so very, very thankful. We've hired an excellent team, a bunch of amazing people across all disciplines. But when we started, it was honestly an Excel spreadsheet. Like our security operations team was an Excel spreadsheet. And we uploaded it to a shared folder on a drive that was appropriately ACLed off. And when you went on call, actually for a while, there's another security engineer, the first security engineer we hired into the team, a guy named Beetle Bailey. And we had 2 pagers. There's a primary pager and a secondary pager. And so once a week, we'd meet in the hall and we'd just trade pagers because you were either primary or secondary because there were only 2 security engineers. And so when you were a primary, you went to the drive, you checked out the spreadsheet, and you just ran the list of issues and you did the things that you needed to follow up on. That was a very, very brief state of affairs. And over the years, we've built a suite of tools to automate things and to aid us. And so the humans are focused on the human tasks and the computers are doing all the things we can make them do. But it was exciting.
It sounds like it. And I bet a lot of folks in the audience and our customers resonate with that, right? Anytime you're doing a startup, sort of all hands on deck, right? And you're the chief cook and bottle washer, right? All at the same time. I reflect on my experience a little bit about 3 years ago where we had a similar situation. We realized that to be a better partner with AWS security and to meet the needs of our customers who were asking us to do deeper engagements in the field and wanted us to provide more and more of the security operations and AppSec that they had historically done for us, thinking of us as a partner or a vendor of theirs. We needed to spin up this kind of capability. And so that's exactly what we did. We grabbed some security consultants and we said, guess what? Now you're in engagement security. And we started that process. And as you point out, we very quickly realized we needed to bring in some specialists, right? Ops work is a little bit different than AppSec engineering or security consulting. We had to bring the right folks in. Sticking on the topic, though, of the handoff, right? I love that vision of just trading pagers. How has on-call handoff or OCHO changed since those early days?
So I mean, it was Beetle and I'd be like, hey, you gonna be around on Tuesday? And we'd trade the pager. It was completely informal. Like, the only thing that mattered is that one of us had the pager. At this point, I'm not sure anyone on the team actually has a pager anymore. Like, cell phones became a thing, and we support them really well. But the way we run on-call now, we've split it. Steve Schmidt has said many times that we have one engineer on call. That is no longer accurate. We now have 2 engineers on call. We've split CloudSec and CorpSec. So we've got 2 teams running in parallel. What we realized is that dealing with issues in our production services was completely different from dealing with issues on client devices and our back office infrastructure. So there are 2 parallel teams, and we have 2 engineers on call. And so every weekday we run 4 shifts. It's 4 6-hour shifts, and then we have a weekend on call. And that's just driven by our experience that, like, things are generally quieter. There are fewer people at work, and to some extent, a lot of our workload is driven by people we don't know. No one at Amazon wrote the log for JNDI support. No one at Amazon published the issues with it. So our workload was driven by people outside the company. But by and large, our workload is correlated to how many people are at their desks on any given day. And so we have 1 weekend shift. And I forget the math because time zones. We do follow the sun. And so the weekend isn't exactly 48 hours long. And I basically never know what time it is in Australia because they do daylight savings time opposite of us. But so we have, on a regular day, 4 6-hour shifts. And then there's tooling that at the end of every shift automatically cuts the on-call handoff to an internal mail alias that a whole bunch of us read every day. And that's one way, that's one mechanism we use to keep our finger on the operational pulse of the business.
And one of the things I really love about that is that, we often hear senior leaders talk about security being a top priority. And it's certainly the way we invest in tooling and absolutely the way we seek to safeguard customer content. But there's an important nuance there in that as a distinguished engineer in the organization and many of your peers, you're reviewing that on-call handoff every day yourself. Right?
Absolutely. So our senior engineers, the principal engineers, we have a principal engineer community, and we have a set of tenets for the principal engineer community, and one of them is exemplary practitioner. We all aspire to be exemplary practitioners, but we all have to be practitioners. You have to have dirt under your fingernails. You can't become a professional consultant. You can't be sitting in the ivory tower talking about how things should be. You have to deal with the world as it is. And so as a security engineer, I have to understand the gritty reality that our service teams are dealing with, that the security team is dealing with. And there's nothing more real than the actual issues that the team is dealing with right now.
Yeah, and we were talking backstage a little bit about the ability to make high velocity decisions, right? And one thing that is very clear is you can't make high velocity decisions if everybody in your org stack isn't close to the details, leadership included. Right now, there's a certain threshold where perhaps Adam and Andy aren't reading the on-call handoff every day, right? But in order to make those high-velocity decisions, right, we've got to be close to the details ahead of time, so that we can make good decisions around the risks that we want to take and the actions that we need to take, right?
Well, high-velocity decisions are easy. Like in the old days, I used to carry entropy devices in my pocket. They'd have a head on one side and some sort of image on the other, and like I can make decisions all day long. The trick is high quality, high velocity decisions, getting them both. And one ingredient to that is exactly what you're talking about. It's making sure that you're in touch with reality, that you understand the constraints that the teams are dealing with, the actual engineering costs of things that you think that we should do. The other is making sure that you have the right people involved in the discussion. So if we ticket a team, the entire company floats on this single ticketing system. And so if your laptop is broken, you cut a ticket. You want to bring a dog to work, you cut a ticket. If there's no toilet paper in the bathroom, you cut a ticket. If the website is down, you cut a ticket. And so everything's a ticket. You ticket a team, you're going to get their on-call. This is probably an entry-level engineer. They've probably worked at the company less than a year. If it's, you need to go do this thing, that's great. If it's, there's this major change that's required to your service, it's going to have roadmap impact, that on-call doesn't have the authority to make a roadmap scale change. They aren't going to know what to do with that ask. And so you need to make sure that you get the right people involved. And so and within the AWS security team, we actually have a tenet around aggressive but appropriate escalation. And an escalation is not an admission of failure. It's not saying that I can't do my job. It's saying we need to make a decision, or you need to be aware of something, and I'm making sure that you have that information. And so there's a constant stream of traffic up and down our org all the time, making sure that everyone is in touch with the operational reality.
How does that conversation go? Do people in the field, are they concerned about over-escalating? Are they concerned about sending in a high severity ticket and in some way getting in trouble? Or what's the feedback you get from people about their willingness to fling tickets at you?
So my mother taught me to be nice to people. At least she tried to teach me to be nice to people. And so there's this natural inclination not to wake people up in the middle of the night, not to bother them, not to scream, fire when you're not sure that there's actually a fire. But this is something, we've actually made our annual security awareness training publicly accessible. And one of the key themes there is if you think you have a problem, page the security team. We follow the sun. There's always someone awake. It is literally our job to take your weird issues and figure out what we need to do with them. Every time I'm out of the office, my out of the office message always ends, if you need urgent help, cut a SEV2 to the security team. A SEV2 is a pager ticket, a right now ticket. Cut a SEV2 to the security team. If you're not sure if your issue is urgent or not, it is. And one of the ways that we know that we're getting this right, and it's delightful, it's absolutely lovely. One of the ways we know that we're getting this right is someone will post in a Slack channel, like, who do I talk to? And there's a whole bunch of people that, like, we didn't deputize them. They've just elected themselves, and they paste in the security reporting portal that we have internally. And everyone knows this, like, they tell them. And then we get a ticket, and it's something that totally doesn't need to be a SEV2, and we do whatever it is we need to do, and the person that cuts the ticket apologizes. And our on-call engineer is like, no, it's okay. I'd rather get dozens of those than one under-escalated issue. You did it exactly right. And the fact that our on-call engineers, the people that are getting paged for these issues, are thanking people for over-escalating out of caution is a sign that we're getting it right.
Absolutely, and it really does come back to some of that earned trust, right? And being kind, right? Especially under duress, right? That on-call engineer may not be stressed, but that person filing the ticket is, whether it's an escalated issue or not. And the ability to treat people, right, in times of stress or change in that way, even as you said, a very junior on-call engineer, is a huge boon to the security community. And I think in the long run makes security operations effective, right?
Oh, absolutely. This is our stock in trade. If there's not a SEV2 ticket running right now, something is wrong. Like, the company is so large, there's so many services, there's got to be a SEV2 ticket open right now. And so the security team deals with these issues all day, every day. And you get used to them. You've got to be careful that you don't get overly used to them and become complacent. But it's a comfortable place for us. It's what we're used to. And you've got some service team member, they've literally never dealt with anything like this before. It's deeply uncomfortable to them. And you have to be empathetic to their plight. The other thing that I've learned is that the idiots on the other side of the wall are almost never idiots. They have a different perspective, they have a different set of facts, they have a different understanding of the situation. And if you put yourself in their position, they may think that we're doing it wrong. And the leadership principles here, Amazonians talk all the time about leadership principles. And bluntly, the first time I saw the leadership principles, I thought it was a pile of Dilbert. Like, it's pointy-haired boss speak, but fine, I'll make these noises because everyone else is making these noises. I have completely changed my tune. I love the leadership principles. I think that the culture that they engender across the company is excellent. It has things that I never would have thought of that I really appreciate. But one of the leadership principles, and they're supposed to be an unordered set, but anytime you see the leadership principles, customer obsession is the first one they list. And you've got to remember that the person on the service team who is not a security professional is being customer obsessed. The person on the security team who's not a service team member is being customer obsessed. We're all here working for customers, and when you make that mental shift, now we're partners, we're working together, and it has much better outcomes. We're treating each other as humans, and we're working together.
Absolutely. We've had a similar experience in these last few years where, we work very closely with our account managers and our SAs, professional services consultants, and often an inbound ticket to us will say something like, this has CJ Moses visibility, or this has Adam Slipsky visibility, or Andy, and our folks respond with, well, of course it does. You wouldn't be reaching out for help if it doesn't, and so let's escalate this together. Let's pull in Beetle or Eric, or let's get that service team on the line, and let's help you get to yes, because I think especially newer people to the company expect security to push back, right, and say no, and we say, no, actually, we're going to be your biggest advocate for you and the customer. We're going to be your biggest advocate in resolving whatever perceived security issue is here, real or not, and we're going to get you there faster. That's the advantage of partnering with us, is we're going to work with AWS security, and we're going to go from the customer all the way in and make sure you go from a bump in the night to everything's all right. And we don't get repeat customers often, but we do on occasion, and you can see the change in their demeanor, right? They're expecting yes instead of no, and you build that relationship, you build that partnership.
And that is incredibly important. AWS has a very large security team, but we also have a giant engineering organization and this incredible breadth of services. And so proportionally, the security team is tiny. It's a drop in the bucket. And we grow sublinearly with the business. Like, they do not allow us to increase headcount as the business increases headcount. And if they did, we wouldn't be able to fill all of those positions. Hiring security professionals is really, really hard. And so if we're the only ones doing this, we're toast. There's no happiness there. We've got to have the business pulling with us. And one of the things that I've been delighted to learn, this was a pleasant surprise for my time in security, is that people are very good at separating me from my role in security. I can be on an escalation call, and the toughest ones of these, a lot of our launches are just, we're going to launch something, customers want it, and when it's ready, it's ready. But reInvent launches. There's this big crunch leading up to reInvent because you only get one chance to hit the main stage at reInvent, and so there's a deadline. Either it makes the main stage or it doesn't make the main stage. And those are some, there's business value, there's security concerns, there's scaling concerns, there's all sorts of equities that go into those conversations, and they can get pretty heated. And I will be on one of these calls, and it'll get heated, and there's people that feel very strongly, again, empathy for the service teams. They've been working on this for months. They have this expectation of seeing the name of their service on the big screen, and the customers clapping about it, and that's something that you really want them to get. But maybe there's a thing that you don't think is acceptable. You have to have that conversation. It can be an uncomfortable conversation. It's tough. And then the call drops, and I'll go out for dinner with those people. And we're still friends, we're still colleagues. We're playing our role at work, but we're all doing it on behalf of customers.
Yeah, it's super important. We are at Amazon, so the leadership principles come up. One of the things I know our team has definitely learned, and you gave a great example of, is how to be effective with have backbone, disagree, and commit, right? So there is that abstraction, right, to be able to articulate the problem, to work the problem, in very sensitive matters, very urgent matters, and still be okay afterwards, right? And that earns a lot of trust at the end of the day. But in the moment, I think when people read the leadership principle, they're often, I think, applying it to long-running business decisions, where you have lots of times to write narratives or argument and debate. And that ability to, in the moment, right, have backbone, present your point of view, right, get other points of input, and then make a decision and execute, right, to resolve the issue, is something that I think teams generally don't work on enough. It's a soft skill, like public speaking, that comes in handy when you need it, but we don't necessarily practice every day.
Well, so I love disagree and commit. It is probably my favorite leadership principle. And it's because, one, I'm very good at forming opinions, and two, I'm very bad at keeping my mouth shut. And If you read the text under disagree and commit, it doesn't say you can speak up. It says leaders are obligated to speak up. So our culture is telling me that I have to open my mouth. Now, the other leadership principles come into play here. Like, you have to have our right a lot. You know, if you're just retarding progress, if you're not bringing valid points, and it's not our right all the time. You don't have to bat 1,000, but it's our right a lot. There's earns trust, and part of earning trust is having a prior track record of providing value. There's customer obsession. You can bring up heretical things, like absolutely heretical, like burn them at the stake kinds of things, if you're doing so from a position of customer obsession. And then the extra one for security, the phrase we use all the time is clinical and precise. It's super easy to talk about or to write about security issues using inflammatory language. And so, like, basically, as soon as I see the word critical in a write-up, I know that we failed clinical and precise. You want to present the facts. You want to do so without drumming up a false sense of urgency. A smart reader, maybe not a security clued reader, but a smart reader will read the facts, and the right level of urgency will be generated because of the facts. And we expect our people to editorialize, like, you know, fact, 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 that's great. But if you're not a security professional, that doesn't mean that the conclusion is going to be obvious. So you state the conclusion. You say, we think this is fast enough, we think this is appropriate, we think we need to do this, but it's all clinical and precise. And that leads to a, as calm as possible, conversation about the path forward.
And it's something that we should probably dig into then here, which is this idea of managing up, right? So much of what we've talked about so far has been within the security ops team and then working with constituents, a service team or somebody in the field. But those narratives and those conversations are often happening with very senior leadership. And so we start with clinical and precise. What should we expect from executives as they're brought into these conversations and need to weigh in on a decision or just be made aware of something?
So the thing that Amazon VPs hate the most is surprises. I think this is probably pretty common across executive leadership. And so you've got to take that into account. The other thing is that these are incredibly busy people. They've got a lot going on. And so they probably lack state and context. And so the time and effort that you invest in making your write-up self-contained and stating the conclusions rather than implying them, and then part of what makes escalations not an admission of failure is, and then you do your job. You say, this is our proposal. And if you have time, you say, and these are the other proposals we considered and eliminated for these reasons. So you're doing your job. But we've given them the information they need. If there are things that you want from these escalations, you say right at the top, this is for your information only. Or we need to know, should we do X or Y? Or we would like you to sign off on the path forward as called out below. You make it super clear, you serve it up to them so that they have all the context they need right there. But what I expect from them, and I've seen this time and time again, is incredibly insightful questions. They pressure test the work that we've done, and it makes our response better.
Absolutely, and again, to just kind of call it, some of these things work really effectively if you've got other dimensions of your culture, right, providing tailwinds. Good example is most of what you just described is about writing. And so if you have a company where you have strong writing culture, right, that works very well. If not, for those listening in or thinking about how you might take some of these lessons learned or just sort of stories from the annals of time forward, it can also be done in a presentation in a PowerPoint, but it's really about the order of thinking. Although I think we have found that when you write it down and everybody can look at the same words together and they don't have to interpret your hand gestures or the vocalization or what have you, it does make it easier to be clinical and precise, to abstract away the presenter from the content and really get to that right decision more quickly.
My nephew was in the US Marine Corps, and at the firing range, they told them slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And I'd never put those words together in that order, but I found it to be very true, especially in security operations. There's a big one, Log4j. Everyone remembers Log4j, unfortunately. that was incredibly acute, very urgent, like people across the internet are responding, and we could have paged any leader in the company into the call. And in the past, I have. Like, I've reached out to all sorts of people, and I've always gotten great responses. But instead, what we did is we spent some time and we wrote it down, and we realized that some things didn't make sense, and so we refined it, and that actually changed our immediate response. We realized gaps in our response. You know, what are the obvious questions? Well, why aren't we doing that already? And so it took us a while, and in this case, a while is a couple of hours, not days. But it took us a while to get to the point where we had a good summary of the event and the outstanding questions and where we needed guidance and what people needed to know about. And the result was an incredibly efficient conversation with our leadership. I wouldn't say it was clean. Like, I mean, again, this is like literally as we're on the phone with our leaders, like new variants are rolling in and people are questioning whether this is possible or not. Like there was nothing neat or clean about it. It was an inherently messy event. But the conversation with our leaders was way more effective because we'd taken the time to write it down, and the act of writing it down actually improved our response before we even shared it with anyone.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So we've been wrapped up in, you know, the response, right? You mentioned earlier, though, that we have people on 6-hour shifts, and then I assume they have some time to do something other than be on call.
Absolutely.
And we tend to invest in builders in our culture, regardless of what their job family is. They could be in marketing, they could be in HR, they could be in security engineering. And so how do you make that builder culture real for the on-call teams?
So the hardest thing is to get the first tool built, because it's abstract until the engineers experience it for themselves. So one, that 2-hour buffer, you know, nominal 8-hour workday, 6-hour shift. First of all, like it can be an incredibly stressful job. When your shift is over, we kick you out. Like you do the handoff, you make sure that the next on-call knows what they're doing. You have to have faith that your teammates are competent. But then we kick you out. Like you have to unplug. You can't stay there 24 hours a day doing the job because it's never ending. That's why it's a shift. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and then you have to go do other things. And so now you've got this extra time, and you have to make sure that you're staffing the team such that you have that buffer. You can't have people that are just going on-call shift to on-call shift to on-call shift, because they are the ones that are closest to the actual issues. And there's a unicorn out there. We will eventually hire them. They're a principal security operations engineer, a principal application security engineer, and a principal software developer. We're going to find this person someday.
They're out there. Might be one of you.
We have not yet hired them. And so we have this entire range, this entire spectrum of tooling. And on the one side, we've got things like Guard Duty and Inspector and Security Hub that are owned by teams. Like these are professional developers and product managers, and like this is a real AWS service, all the way down to eye-searingly bad Ruby scripts written by a security engineer in the middle of a ticket. And I love that fact, because if you sit down and say, I'm going to build an awesome tool, and you think deep thoughts, and you consider all the possibilities, and you invest a huge amount of time, you are not going to build an awesome tool. You are not close enough to the problem. You don't have enough experience with it. And so our tools are very rarely beautiful, but they grow up from the eye-searingly bad Ruby script into the public AWS services. And they stop at all sorts of places along the way, getting more robust, getting more scalable, becoming something that like more than one person can maintain, but enabling, authorizing, like getting these security engineers to sit down and say, what do you need? And sometimes the most valuable tools are things that save you 30 seconds. It's just it saves you 30 seconds again and again and again and again, and the net result is a massive time savings. And the problem with this is that progress is incremental. It's not like you go home on Friday and the job is hard, and you come in on Monday, and one of your colleagues has deployed the tool, and now, I mean, everyone's sitting there on the couch eating bonbons. It's all of these tiny little incremental improvements, and it's compound interest, it grows, but there's never a day when there's a discontinuity. There's never a day when it suddenly got better. And so you need a yardstick. You need to be able to snap yourself back to the way it was a while ago and say, oh my gosh, like, I mean, remember that ticket? That used to be the worst kind of ticket, and now we handle them in 5 minutes. Or do you remember that meeting? Like, oh my gosh, we couldn't figure out what to do, and it popped up again, and the automation handled it without a human getting involved.
It's so important, when I talk to customers in the field, a lot of times they express the work you're talking about as, I'll say, conventional IT projects. And so they're realizing that incremental value, but over very, very long periods of time, and they're focused on cost, schedule, performance, and spending lots of time writing weekly status reports and work breakdown structures or organizing stories and sprints. And I think all that has its place, but when you work in an ops culture, building tools to support ops metrics as opposed to project metrics, I think is a big mind shift for a lot of people.
Well, this is a naturally messy discipline. And it's actually one of the things I love about the job. I've worked with plenty of people that I respect, people that have been successful at Amazon that have not done well in this environment because there's so much ambiguity, there's so much context switching, there's so many unexpected events. It keeps me engaged, it keeps me interested. I hate doing the same thing over and over again, and I like the fact that I don't know what's coming next. But as a result, it's incredibly hard to plan. That's why we hire security operations engineers. It's because these things require human judgment. Maybe we've seen that and we've seen that, but we've never seen them combined like this. And we need a human being to figure out, like, what does this actually mean to us? And I love that work. And so I'm sure that out there somewhere, maybe the principal AppSec SecOps software development engineer,
Perhaps.
There's an ideal way of structuring the tool development that backs this work, but perfect coordination is infinitely expensive. And so we're constantly riding the pendulum back and forth where, like, okay, we just had this tool fall over, we hadn't invested in it enough, it had scaled too high, and Jane was on vacation, and she's the only one that can resurrect it, and so the whole team was suffering and we're not going to bother Jane on vacation because you go on vacation. Like, turn your phone off when you're on vacation. And so, like, we got burned by this, so okay, we're gonna do a lot more of, like, professional software development, and we're gonna add structure to it, and then things don't move as fast, and, like, we haven't got that recipe. I think it's inherently messy, and we've gotten a lot more okay with it being messy and the tools being scrappy. And one of the nice things about that is that then the engineers are themselves the owners of the tools, and they can evolve them very quickly. And then once you've done that for a while, and you've got a couple generations of that evolution, they actually do the job they need to do, and then you can start investing more in them and put a team around it.
Yeah, that's super key. It took us actually about a year to just get that glimmer of insight. I probably should have asked you outright when we got started, but as I mentioned earlier, we started by using a number of consultants and engagement managers to build our SecOps team. We call it engagement security. And so they set about making a lot of plans and schedules and work back and all the rest of it. And we spent more time focused on project management metrics than ops metrics. We weren't seeing the improvement in what we were doing. We were worried about when the thing was going to get the next feature or when the next demo day was. And when we were able to flip that script, right, and focus on, well, yeah, but how is it driving down this metric, or how is it driving up that metric? And I don't really care, to be honest, how you built it, or whether it'll be done Thursday morning or Thursday afternoon. It changed the conversation, and it gave people the opportunity to be owners. Instead of stewards, all of a sudden it was their tool or their mechanism. And then they wanted to work backwards from the customer. They wanted to create a closed loop. They wanted to measure the effectiveness of what they built after they saw it have an ops impact. And your point about security ops builders being deep owners of the tool that they build is, again, not to be overlooked. And I think, again, as I talk to customers, a lot of times they have other teams building tools for the SecOps, or they're buying tools. And so the SecOps team's job is really to oversee the implementation of it and then to be users or consumers of the tool. And so I think there's really an interesting opportunity to have in the community, right, about being builders and generating that kind of triumvirate unicorn that you're searching for.
I love the word community there. So a bunch of years ago, one of our engineers built this absolutely horrible system It was a CloudFormation script with an AMI, and you performed some mystical incantation, and there was a Jupyter notebook. And it would do one thing. And then, like a week later, another engineer on the team automated it a little bit better, so the mystical incantation was less mystical. And here we are 3-4 years later, and it's an automated runbook system. Pretty much every engineer on the team has added an ETL adapter or added a runbook to it or something. And there's a feeling on the team like this is ours. And there's a pride in what they've built. And it's got rough edges all over the place. It's designed to be used by a small team of expert users. It's not releasable software, but it does what they need it to do, and they take pride in it, and that it makes it real to them. This is what I was talking about earlier, where it's abstract wisdom until you've actually experienced it. And so now they're constantly thinking, like, what do I need to add? And so they're in the depths of a ticket, they're dealing with something, but there's a little thread running in the back of their brain. And the shift ends, they come up for air, and they're like, this is what I need to build. And then the whole team is excited that this thing has been added, and the flywheel just spins faster.
Yeah, that's so cool. And you mentioned something in there that we can probably dig into a little bit more. This idea of organic culture emerging, right? This idea that now they have ownership and pride over what they've built, and they're collaborating and building. You and I were talking also backstage a little bit, and you mentioned the ACK meme. Right? And so there's this idea that, we have our leadership principles, we often have tenets, and then we want to do some intentional things to create culture, but we also really want to see culture emerge that's positive and generative and supportive. The ACK meme sounds like one of those. Would you mind telling the audience about it?
Yeah, so this is the OCHO, on-call handoff, emails, and they come out at the end of every shift, so 4 times a day on normal days and then once on the weekend. And the expectation is that the engineer going on call acts the handoff. They just literally 3 letters, ACK, hit send. And this is going, and we're developing this operational tempo. And then one day, one of the engineers posted a meme. And it was glorious. I completely forget what the first one is, but we've all got folders on our desktops of our favorite ACK images, and we keep swearing that we need to make a coffee table book. And this is a thing that they just started doing on their own. And every so often it flares up and there's a Photoshop contest, a global Photoshop contest. And it's incredibly hard to knit people that are intentionally spaced around the world. There's never a time when all of these people are awake, or there should never be a time when they're all awake, into a single cohesive team. And they're one-upping each other on their ACK images and remixing them. And it's wonderful. It's a sign that they're doing their own thing. They're building their own culture as a team.
Yeah, it's absolutely awesome. And sometimes it's intentional, right? So we've got these opportunities to take things that are organic and kind of breathe some additional fire and energy into them, right? Kind of these big Photoshop events, perhaps. And then there are intentional things we do, like you mentioned earlier, with encouraging everybody to escalate, right? And that's SEV2. How do you think about the use of mechanisms in SecOps, right? We've talked about culture and LPs. We've talked about automation, but there's often this thing in the middle, this closed loop mechanism that kind of binds it all together.
Yeah, so when an Amazonian says mechanism, they mean something very specific. The story goes, and I've actually seen the video, so I have secondhand knowledge of the story, that someone was complaining that the coordination across the company, and it's hilarious looking back, because this is from an all hands in 2005, and someone was complaining that the company was getting too large, and it's gotten a wee bit larger since 2005, but that communication across the company, coordination, was getting too difficult. And Jeff's response was, good intentions don't work. Of course, the person on the other side has good intentions. They're an Amazonian, they're customer obsessed just like you are. They're trying hard, yet look at the results. Good intentions don't work, you need a mechanism. And so we always think in terms of mechanisms. And the way I think about it is the security ratchet. you're wrenching on something, and it's only going to turn one way. You push the handle the other way, you just get clicky noises. You turn it the other way, the bolt gets tighter. It's only going to turn one way. It's fine to make mistakes. It's fine to learn new things about the universe, like, maybe there are bugs in OpenSSL that no one has looked at, or maybe the way that we've been thinking about branch prediction in processors is flawed, or whatever. Like, you're constantly going to be learning new things, but you can't regress. You can't make the same mistake again. And I'm not going to claim that we're perfect. I mean, it's a team built of humans with all of the joys and perils that entails, but we're constantly thinking of, okay, we've done this. What is the mechanism that we can add? And you were talking earlier that you weren't measuring the operational statistics, you were measuring the business metrics. That's one of the things that working security at Amazon has taught me, is you always have to check the data plane. Yeah. Our customers don't care if it shouldn't have happened. Our customers don't care if we have an elegant proof that it can't happen. All they care is that it did happen. And so you've got to check that end to end and make sure that it's doing what you expect it to do.
Yeah, and it's something that the ownership matters, right? And a strong ownership culture, owning the automation, owning the mechanism, right? And also owning a different kind of escalation, which is if you don't have the answer, you'll own getting it on their behalf, right? And a lot of things come to security that maybe don't belong in security, but still need a valid answer, right?
We are the designated catchers of weird.
Yeah.
We're the default node at the end of the flow chart, because a lot of security issues are weird. And we actually have a tenet, like when we don't own the answer, we own finding the answer. And one of the things I hate the most, I call it ticket ping pong. I'm sure you've experienced this in whatever work tracking system you have. Like, team 1 says no, it's team 2, and team 2 says no, it's team 3, and team 3 says no, it's team 4, and team 4 says no, it's team 1. And it's like this Spider-Man meme where everyone's pointing at everyone else. And I mean, you can just keep making laps on that circuit, making no progress. And like, it has to stick somewhere. And if it doesn't stick anywhere else, it sticks with us. And the way we'll resolve that is by escalating. We'll get the right leaders involved, and we'll say, look, like, I understand why each of these teams individually thinks that that's the right answer, but in aggregate, it's the wrong answer. What do we do? And they may not know, and we'll get another group of people involved, but we'll do that quickly, and we'll break the analysis paralysis, and we'll figure out a path forward.
It sounds like there's always tickets being fired. Are there times of silence? Are there opportunities to listen for silence, or to pick up on areas where you would expect tickets and maybe you're not getting any?
So this is the peril here. Like, again, I love the excitement. I love knowing that there's always something new coming around the corner. But our to-do list is infinitely long. There is never a moment when the ticket queue quiets down. And there never will be, because as we get better, we just dig deeper. We just look at the next level and the next level and the next level. So if you're not careful, it can be incredibly discouraging. It can be disheartening. Like, I come on shift, the ticket queue is infinite. I work really hard for 6 hours, the ticket queue is infinite. Like, maybe it's infinity plus 1. Maybe I'm failing to tread water. Like, that can be so discouraging. And so you need to look for the disasters that didn't happen, the craters that didn't form. And it can be hard to find them. We had a great example late last week. I saw a news headline, and it was about a vulnerability in a commonly used software package, and I bounced it to our on-call, and I said, are we impacted? And the response that I got back in like 15 minutes, and this was not a page, this was just an email. The response I got back in like 15 minutes was, this was picked up by our automatic news trawler 2 days ago. Here's the ticket number that we tracked it in. This is the ticket that we cut to the vulnerability management team where they determined that there was no impact. This is the ticket that we cut to the marketplace team where they determined no impact. Nothing to see here, move along. And I mean, it was just awesome. Like, it took us years to build all of those machines, but they just worked perfectly. And so I stopped and like added a whole bunch of leadership to the thread. I'm like, this was amazing. And you've got to recognize those moments and call them out. And it helps people understand how far you've come. Because again, that compound interest, it adds up. Like, we're so much better than we were a year ago or 2 years ago or, heaven forbid, 12 years ago when I was the only engineer. Like, there's no way that I personally could have built all of the things that we have. Like, having the whole team around us is awesome. But you've got to have those moments where you realize, like, oh my gosh, like, we've come so far.
Yeah, it really is important to recognize that, and also recognize, right, the good work that people are doing. We haven't talked a lot about professional development, supporting the team. We've talked about, how to kind of engage them in the work. What kind of programs or what kind of initiatives do you have in place to really develop the team over time? Does somebody stay, a SecOps engineer for life?
Some people do. I naturally gravitate towards that work. I don't understand why, but I mean, if you leave me alone, I find myself in the ticket queue again. But a lot of people see it as a stepping stone to other jobs in security, which is something we actively encourage. A lot of our best hires have been from within unexpected areas within Amazon. We've had some absolutely amazing engineers that we've grown out of customer service or a support organization. So these are people that have worked for Amazon for a while. They understand our culture, our tools, and all of that. They want to learn about security. And another place is our SOC, our Security Operations Center. These are the people that deal with the physical access control systems, alarms, things like that. And they're great places to get started in security because there's a lot of structure around the job. And so there's a lot of run books written, there's a lot of procedures written, there's a lot of tickets that you can crib off of. We've got a whole bunch of training to help people ramp up because the way we do it is peculiar. The way everyone does it is peculiar, but our peculiar is our peculiar. And so we've had a lot of luck there. We have a program called AI2 where we take people that have recently left the military, and in some ways the military sets people up ideally for working security at Amazon. In other ways, things like our aggressive escalation culture, we've got to give them some new skills. And they do rotations around, and it's incredible how quickly these people become really, really valuable because they've done a bunch of rotations. They've got maybe not a ton of depth in these areas, but they've got all of these different perspectives. And so that's been a great thing. And one of the things that I really like about this, not only are we growing a whole bunch of security engineers, many of whom move into security operations, then on to some other role in security or a service team or something like that, many of whom have stuck around security operations for years, but this tends to be a source of diverse candidates. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I know everyone says that, diverse perspectives lead to better outcomes. It does. Like, I've personally seen it. We've got engineers that they've forged their own path through the world. They didn't do the standard high school tech degree, get a job. And they come from different places on earth. They have different life experiences. And they look at a problem and they suggest things that I would never have thought of that are better solutions. And so I've really enjoyed being able to invest in people that way. And I really believe that that's the only way that we're going to hit our long-term hiring goals because, again, security engineers, security professionals of all kinds are tough to hire.
They are tough to hire, and it's so refreshing to hear you talk about early career and diverse, right? I think the predisposition for a lot of hiring managers in security is, I want somebody seasoned. I want somebody who can do the job day one. I want somebody who's been on call before. And it's fantastic to hear you say that we need those people too. But we're investing in the long term for our people and for the community, right? Whether they stay with Amazon or not, we'll now have seasoned security professionals out there protecting customers, protecting the internet. Right? It's really quite a good way.
We've got some engagements with a couple of universities. It's still early days there, but it turns out that there's a ton of educational institutions, colleges and some less traditional things that are really hungry for the course material. And they're eager to work with us. Their students are eager to learn this stuff. And some of them are going to wind up with jobs at Amazon, but some of them are going to go elsewhere. And that, again, it's to the industry's benefit.
Yeah. When I was looping, or when I was interviewing at Amazon almost 10 years ago, you were on my loop. And one of the things that I really recall is that everybody I spoke to was able to tell me all of the security features of AWS. And I thought, wow, these cats are on message, right? And then it turns out that those were all the security features that we had available on the platform at the time. And I thought, wow, they're really good at knowing like a relatively robust list of things. We've made some announcements this week, and we made some announcements over the last couple of weeks. What's your favorite current security service or feature? What are you excited about now?
So full disclosure, I learn about a lot of our launches, even security launches, from Jeff Barr. Like, it is impossible for anyone to keep up. And we actually have a Slack channel where a bot automatically notifies you of all launches, and I try and follow that. But, I mean, it's tough. I really like guard duty and the vision of extending guard duty to other services. The reason that I'm excited about it is it doesn't do everything. It's not the answer to every security problem, but it's something that a security engineer can make a unilateral decision to enable. And because we're getting all of our data from under the bar for the shared responsibility model, VPC flow logs and DNS logs and CloudTrail and other data sources, there's no agent to install, there's no roles to configure. It can't cause a production outage. It can't cause a performance impact. And so it's an incredibly easy adoption decision. And in fact, it's a decision that we made. Like, I mean, we had to talk to the guard duty team before we turned it on internally because we have a lot of infrastructure. I mean, every single RDS instance is itself an EC2 instance. Every load balancer is a collection of EC2 instances. Like, you don't just casually put that kind of load on the service. But we did not have to coordinate with thousands of service teams when we turned it on. We had to coordinate with guard duty. Yeah. And it has enabled us to turn off a ton of our internal custom security tooling in favor of this professionally owned service. And extending that model out to every AWS service eventually is going to be incredibly powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know customers love guard duty, right? When we go in and talk about preparing for incident response and making sure our environment's forensically ready, right? We talk about the roughly 27 log sources that we have available, and depending on the customer's needs or the services they're using, they may turn on some or all of those. But the one that makes the biggest difference is guard duty, right? So if you're thinking about what you might do, if you're gonna potentially have an escalation, guard duty on, and then I find actually closely followed by Security Hub, right? So that's another one that helps you look around corners. It's not invasive. There's no agent on the system, and it gives you a prioritized list of things to look into, right, proactively. And so those two combined, I've noticed really do help customers in the SecOps community in a big, big way.
No, and I have customers regularly ask us, like, okay, but what about the really good threat intel? What about no, I mean, it's guard duty. That's literally what we use internally. And I like it that way. I like the fact that we've got this one team, they're the experts, they do the work, and then we all benefit.
Yeah, super cool. I really appreciate your time today. We're wrapping up at the top of the hour here. So thank you very much for sharing with us your insights, the building a security operations program here at AWS. And again, thank you for all of your mentorship and partnership as we've been working in the field to try to ride on your coattails and duplicate some of that success.
No, thank you, Hart, for all the work you do with customers. And to any of you, if we run into each other in the rest of the conference, I would love to learn from you. Like, this is the reason that we do this conference. A lot of it is people from Amazon up on stage talking, and that's great. Like, we are ostensibly the experts in AWS security, but getting together in person like this and having customers talking to each other and us learning from our customers is really the biggest value that I extract from the conference. So please feel free to hit us up.
Cool. Thanks a lot, everybody. Cheers.